At that Christmas party, my sister whispered to my mom, "Look at his face. Absolutely disgusting. If I were Dustin, I'd definitely leave Michael at home. Bringing him is like going around scaring people." Her whisper was loud enough that all the guests turned to look at my mom and sister, and that cruel whisper revealed my family's true face. While I was helpless, being restrained by 3 men, the person I hated most in my family stood up to defend my son. What that person did next sent my family into panic. Hello, everyone. I'm Dustin, 38 years old, and I work as a salesperson at a used car dealership in Austin, Texas. The story I'm telling today happened over 2 years ago, during Christmas 2023. And even now, sitting here retelling every detail, I still can't forget what happened that day. There are wounds that time can't heal, and the wound my family inflicted on my son is one of them. That day, around 4 in the afternoon, I drove my son to my parents' house for our annual family Christmas party. That Christmas, only my son and I attended the party because my wife had passed away 6 months earlier, after a tragic accident on her way to pick up our son from school. My son's name is Michael. He was 9 that year. That heartbreaking accident took my wife's life at the scene, but fortunately, Michael survived. However, he had to bear very severe injuries, and one of the most serious injuries was to his face. Michael broke his cheekbone and also suffered burns on one side of his face from impact with burning glass fragments from the car. Every time I look at the scars on my son's face, my heart aches to the core. I once planned to get cosmetic surgery for him as soon as possible. Still, the doctor advised waiting until he's an adult, at least 18, because children's facial bones are still developing and early surgery could cause many unforeseen complications. After that accident, I became a single father. Life for both of us changed completely. I thought that after all the losses we'd been through, my family, the people I called dad, mom, and sister, would open their arms wider to welcome and love my son even more. I believed that in our darkest hour, family would be our strongest support. But I was wrong. Around 5 in the afternoon, Michael and I arrived at my parents' house. As soon as we stepped into the living room, I saw about 15 people sitting there. A few relatives looked up, greeted me, and suggested that my son and I sit down and chat with them. When Mom and Dad saw us walk in, they just nodded to acknowledge our presence coldly. Their eyes glanced over my son's face, then quickly looked away, like they were trying to avoid looking at something that made them uncomfortable. Between Mom and Dad sat Bella, my sister's daughter, an 8-year-old girl with shiny blonde hair and bright blue eyes. They were hugging Bella and bragging to a few relatives about something, their faces glowing with pride. Next to them sat Barbara, my sister, and her husband, David. She sat there listening to everyone praise Bella and kept flashing a smug smile. Barbara is 3 years older than I am. She's currently a business director for a major real estate company in Houston, earning over $200,000 a year. She's always been my parents' golden child, the pride they show off whenever they get the chance. Seeing me appear, she glanced over with a dismissive look, then quickly turned back to her conversation, as if I were just an invisible ghost not worth bothering with. While I was still standing in the middle of the living room, awkwardly looking for a place to sit, a familiar figure walked out from the kitchen. It was Lucas, my younger brother. Lucas works as a software engineer for a big tech company in San Jose. His annual salary is probably even higher than my sister's. He's also Mom and Dad's pride, alongside Barbara. Lucas is 4 years younger than I am. In this family, I really hate him. I hate him for the way he always acts like he's teaching me lessons and puts me down, from my job to my life. Every time we meet, he never forgets to subtly remind me that I'm just an ordinary used car salesman, while he and Barbara are soaring high on top of glory. He often asks me when I'll have some ambition or think about my child's future. In that tone I hate with a passion. As soon as he saw us, Lucas walked over, pulled a chocolate bar from his pocket, and handed it to Michael. He crouched down to my son's eye level, his voice surprisingly gentle as he said, "This is for you, a present." Seeing Lucas give him candy, Michael shyly reached out to accept it. He quietly replied, "Thank you, Uncle Lucas." Lucas then reached up to pat Michael's head affectionately. My brother's action surprised me somewhat, because he was the second person to look straight at my son's face without showing fear or disgust. The first person was me, Michael's father. Watching him do that, I felt a bit warm inside. After Lucas patted his head, I quickly found an empty spot and sat down, starting to chat with relatives I hadn't seen in a long time. At that moment, I had no idea that in just a few minutes, my son would be humiliated by his own closest family members in front of everyone at the party. Around 6 o'clock, after all the guests had arrived, everyone started moving to the long dining table set up in the dining room. Michael, like every year, followed his habit of finding the seat near my mom's right side. That was the spot he'd always sat in since he was little, when my mom used to feed him and tell fairy tales during the party. But everything was different now. Just as he pulled out the chair to sit down, Barbara suddenly appeared right behind him. She looked Michael up and down, then said in a fake tone, "Michael, this year sit somewhere else. Give this spot to Bella, okay?" After that question, Michael froze. He turned to look at me, his eyes full of confusion, as if he wanted my opinion. Not wanting my son to be mistreated, I stood up and said straight to Barbara, "There's an empty spot on Mom's left. Why not let Bella sit there?" Barbara looked at me with cold eyes, then replied, "I don't want to. Bella asked to sit here." Not wanting to make a scene in front of all the relatives on a holiday, I tried to hold back the anger rising in my chest, then turned to tell my son, "Michael, this year let's switch spots. Can you sit on Grandma's left?" Just as I finished speaking, before Michael could agree or refuse, my mom coldly spoke up, "That spot belongs to Barbara. I have private matters to discuss with your sister during the party." My dad also jumped in, his voice stern as he told us, "Sitting anywhere is fine. Fighting over a seat. Don't embarrass me in front of everyone." Seeing their attitude and the words they said, I understood a painful truth. They didn't want us at this party. Our presence was just reluctant, a family obligation they couldn't refuse. And Michael, with his scarred face from the accident, was just a stain on the perfect family picture they wanted to display to everyone. Not wanting to argue anymore, I grabbed Michael's arm and decided to leave the party immediately. I would take him home and we'd have our own Christmas, like we should have done from the beginning. But before I could step away, Lucas suddenly appeared from behind. He took Michael's arm gently but firmly, then said loud enough for everyone to hear, "This year Michael sits with me." Without letting Michael react, Lucas pulled Michael to where he was sitting in the middle of the dining table. He gently pulled out a chair, placed his hand on Michael's shoulder, and helped him sit down comfortably. Then he sat down next to my son, his hand still resting on the back of Michael's chair like silent protection. I sat down in an empty chair nearby, my heart still burning with anger, but also feeling a strange warmth spreading through my chest. At least in this family, there was still one person who saw Michael as a normal kid, a grandson who needed love, not a burden that needed to be hidden. During the first hour of the party, the atmosphere was relatively cheerful, or at least appeared to be on the surface. Relatives occasionally turned to ask about my and Michael's life, whether the car sales job was going well, and how Michael was doing in school after the accident. They carefully avoided mentioning my wife because they didn't want to make me sadder, and I appreciated that thoughtfulness. However, some relatives still spoke thoughtlessly. They asked me straight out when I'd get Michael cosmetic surgery, as if my son's face was a problem that needed to be fixed immediately. They advised me to get Michael's cosmetic surgery early, so he'd be more confident, wouldn't get teased by friends, and could live a normal life. Luckily, it all stopped at thoughtless advice. No one had directly criticized or insulted my son yet. I thought the party would pass by peacefully like that. But then, my family, my parents, my sister, showed me their true face. While the music had gotten quieter so people could chat more easily, when most guests were busy with their private conversations, a loud whisper reached my ears. And the person saying those cruel words was none other than my sister, Barbara. At that moment, Mom suddenly leaned toward Barbara and said, "Dustin must be under a lot of pressure." At the sound of my name, I stopped eating, my ears perking up to listen to what they were saying. Right after that, Barbara burst out laughing while whispering to Mom, but her whisper was actually loud enough for half the party to hear. She said, "Look at his face. Absolutely disgusting. If I were Dustin, I'd definitely leave Michael at home. Bringing him is like going around scaring people." The atmosphere in the room suddenly froze completely. The chatter died. Silverware stopped clinking. Everyone seemed to turn in unison to look at my mom and Barbara, faces full of shock and disbelief. As for me, I slowly turned to look at Michael. My son sat there, face pale, lips trembling, and tears already welling up in his innocent eyes. Lucas sat beside him. His face changed color briefly. Then he quickly reached out to pat Michael's back as if to comfort him, his mouth pressed tight, as if he was trying to hold something back. After looking at my son, I slowly turned to face my mom and sister. I was shocked, completely shocked. I thought after all the losses my son and I had been through, they would love us more. I thought my wife's death would make them open their hearts, would make them look at Michael with affection instead of fear. I thought the wounds on my son's face, the pain he'd had to bear, would awaken compassion in them. But it was all just my naive and foolish thinking. Now Barbara and my mom realized they'd whispered too loudly, and all the guests had heard and seen. Their faces flushed red instantly, not from shame about what they'd said, but from embarrassment at being caught. Barbara quickly forced a smile and said loudly to everyone, "My mom and I were just having a private conversation. It's nothing." My mom also hurriedly chimed in, her voice stammering unnaturally. "Right, that's right. Everyone keep eating and talking. Don't worry about it." But the guests were still staring at them, those looks full of displeasure and judgment. As for me, I couldn't hold back anymore. I stood up, took heavy but decisive steps toward Barbara and my mom. Seeing me approach with a terrifying expression, they looked somewhat panicked. Barbara stammered, "Dustin, I wasn't talking about your son." Before she could finish, my lightning-fast hand grabbed the nearest glass of red wine on the table. Without a second's hesitation, without an extra movement, I threw the wine straight into Barbara's face. She couldn't react in time, couldn't dodge. The red wine splattered all over her elaborately made-up face, dripping down the expensive dress she'd definitely spent thousands of dollars on. I gritted my teeth, saying each word slowly to her face. "If you dare insult Michael one more time, I'll make you disappear forever." My mom, seeing her golden child treated like this, screamed, "Have you lost your mind? Dustin, how dare you throw wine in your sister's face?" I turned to look at Mom. I replied to her, voice unwavering, "And you, if you weren't my mother, I would have given you a beating already." Mom went completely pale after my words. Maybe from the day I was born until this very moment, she'd never witnessed me lose it like this. My dad jumped into the fight too. To protect his wife and precious daughter, he was ready to confront me. He shot up from his chair, pushing it back hard so it fell to the floor with a loud crash. He pointed his finger straight at my face, shouting, "Dustin, this is my house. How dare you act like this in my house?" As soon as Dad finished speaking, I asked back challengingly, "Why not? Anyone who dares insult my son, I'll never let slide, even if it's my own parents." Dad argued back, his voice cold to the point of cruelty. "Nobody insulted your son. We just told the truth. Anyone who sees your kid's face gets scared. That's the truth you have to accept." After that statement, as if to prove he was right, he shifted his gaze from me to the relatives sitting around the party table and asked them, "Everyone, don't you think I'm right? Is there anyone here who doesn't think so?" The relatives are now clearly split into two camps. One camp consisted of people who'd always followed my parents, who'd relied on them for years and were now repaying the favor with flattery. They spoke bluntly, saying hurtful things I couldn't believe were coming from family members. Some said I was too sensitive, that Barbara was joking. Others said I really should leave Michael at home, because a face like that ruins the party atmosphere. The other camp stayed completely silent, not wanting to join this family war. They looked down at their plates, pretending not to hear anything. Hearing those cruel words from relatives, the blood in my body seemed to boil. I lunged toward one of the relatives who just opened their mouth to insult my son, but was immediately grabbed tightly by three other men who rushed in. I struggled, trying to break free from their restraint, screaming and cursing at them. But they wouldn't let me go, their arms gripping me like iron clamps. In the middle of that chaos, Michael ran to my side. He cried and begged everyone, "Please, let my dad go. Please let my dad go." Seeing tears rolling down my son's face, I felt my heart shatter. I had failed. I couldn't protect my son, had let him witness this scene, had let him hear those poisonous words. I was a terrible father. After begging everyone with no response, my son ran to his grandfather, voice trembling as he pleaded, "Grandpa, please let my dad go. I'm begging you, Grandpa. Don't hurt my dad. Please, Grandpa." The relatives who'd been silent earlier began to act. They stepped forward and firmly demanded that the people holding me let me go. Under pressure from multiple sides, those restraining me finally released their grip. The moment I was freed, I rushed to Michael's side. I held my son tight, my own tears starting to flow despite trying to hold them back. I whispered in his ear, "Don't beg them, Michael. You don't need to beg anyone. Never bow down to people like them." Michael hugged me tight, his small fingers clutching the back of my shirt like he was afraid I'd disappear. He told me, his voice broken between sobs, "Mom's gone. You're the only family I have left. I don't want them to hurt you. I don't want you to get hurt. I don't want to lose you." Hearing my son say that, my heart felt like it was being squeezed. I held him even tighter, tears streaming down my cheeks that I couldn't stop. Now Dad stepped beside us. He stood there, looking down at us hugging each other on the floor, then said to me coldly, "Take your son and get out of my house right now and never come back here again. From today, I don't have any son named Dustin, and I don't have any grandson named Michael." Those cruel words from Dad were like a knife stabbed straight into my heart. But I didn't want to argue anymore. I didn't want to fight anymore either. All I wanted then was to get my son out of that hellish place as quickly as possible. A few seconds later, I stood up, one hand still holding Michael close, then turned and walked toward the door. I didn't look back, didn't say another word. Behind me, I could hear Barbara crying and screaming something, but I didn't bother listening. I thought everything was over, and tonight would end with father and son driving home in silence and tears. But I was wrong. Someone had stood up to defend us, and that person was the one I least expected. Just as I grabbed my son's hand and took a few steps toward the exit, Lucas's voice suddenly rang out from behind. "Hold on, the party's not over yet. Now it's time for my performance." Hearing Lucas speak, I stopped and turned to look at my brother. Lucas was still sitting in his spot, holding an iPad. I realized that during the entire conflict, he'd been completely silent, not saying a word, just sitting there doing something on the iPad. At the time, I thought he was being indifferent and abandoning us, but it turns out I was completely wrong. Lucas gently stood up, holding the iPad, and began operating it. His fingers moved across the screen skillfully. About 20 seconds later, he stopped, then held the iPad high so everyone in the room could see the screen. Lucas scanned his eyes across each face in the room, then asked loudly with a sarcastic voice, "Does everyone recognize who's in this photo? Looks absolutely disgusting, doesn't it?" The photo he'd just shown everyone was a picture of Barbara from her 2010 car accident. At that time, her face was swollen, one eye bruised black and blue, lips split and bleeding, and nose crooked and bent. I was amazed to see that photo appear on the screen. I had no idea Lucas had taken or saved these photos, and why he'd kept them all these years. Seeing that horrifying photo of herself from over 10 years ago exposed in front of all the relatives, Barbara went pale. She screamed, "Lucas, turn off the iPad right now. Turn it off." Lucas didn't turn it off. Instead, he calmly swiped to the next photo. Barbara had her first nose job in 2011. Because she chose a cheap cosmetic service to save money, the surgery failed miserably. Her nose after surgery was weirdly elongated, crooked, and bent like a bird's beak, looking just like a witch's nose in cartoons. Seeing that photo appear in front of everyone, I almost burst out laughing despite the situation being anything but funny. I remember that year, Barbara had locked herself in her room for nearly 3 months, not meeting anyone. After undergoing another surgery at a more reputable facility at a much higher cost, her nose finally returned to its standard shape. While the guests were staring in shock at the photos on the screen, Lucas turned to look at Barbara with a cold smile, then said sarcastically, "Hello, which Barbara? It's been so long since I've seen your real face." Barbara was now completely panicked. She turned to her husband for help. David, her husband, immediately stood up and yelled at Lucas, "Enough, Lucas! Turn off the iPad. Stop making Barbara a laughingstock in front of everyone." After hearing this, Lucas threw his head back and laughed mockingly, then said sternly to David, "Earlier, when your wife insulted Michael, why didn't you stand up for him? Why didn't you tell your wife to stop? Or do you think the same as your wife?" Being questioned by Lucas, David stammered, I. Lucas raised his hand to signal David to be quiet, not giving him a chance to explain or defend himself. Then he turned to look at my dad, his eyes sharp as a knife blade. Lucas asked Dad, "And what about you? Why could you be so heartless toward Michael? Michael is your grandson. Michael lost his mother just 6 months ago. He's suffered enough. You should be the one who loves Michael the most, protects Michael the most, not standing there chasing away your grandson like chasing away a stray dog." Dad was utterly silent. He stood there like a stone statue, face stiff, unable to say a word. Lucas then slowly turned to look at Mom. He sighed heavily, then said coldly, "And you, I have nothing left to say to you. You've disappointed me so much. You're Michael's grandmother, the one who should shelter him. But you stood there laughing when your daughter insulted your grandson." My mom opened her mouth, seeming to want to say something in defense, but then closed it again in silence. Maybe she realized there was no acceptable defense for what had happened. Barbara now screamed like a madwoman, "Dad! Mom! Say something! Why aren't you defending me? Why are you standing there silent like that?" Lucas turned back to look at Barbara, flashed a mysterious smile, then burst out laughing. His laughter echoed through the silent room, carrying a bone-chilling sarcasm. After that laugh, he coldly declared, "Because this house is in my name. Dad and Mom are living in my house." I stood frozen after hearing this information. My parents moved to this house in 2021, right after the pandemic. At that time, I was told they had to sell the old house to pay debts from failed business ventures. Many times, when I asked, they said the current house was rented and that they were living on their meager pension. But now, the truth was exposed before my eyes. This house wasn't rented. This house belonged to Lucas. My parents had been living in my brother's house. While everyone was still in shock, Lucas looked at my parents, then at Barbara. His eyes swept over each person, cold and unforgiving. Then he said loud enough for everyone in the room to hear, "You have one chance to apologize to Michael, and I think you should apologize right now, before I really get angry." As soon as Lucas finished speaking, my parents seemed to wake up from a trance. They quickly stood up, walked rapidly to Michael and me. My dad bent down to look at Michael, his voice trembling. "Michael, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I shouldn't have mistreated you. I'm sorry." My mom also hurriedly followed. "Michael, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I should have loved you more, protected you more. I'm sorry." Hearing his grandparents apologize, Michael didn't react immediately. He stood there, red eyes looking up at his grandparents' faces, then turned to look at me as if asking for my opinion. Then he looked at Lucas again. A few seconds of heavy silence passed. Then Michael replied, "I don't forgive you. Grandpa and Grandma aren't apologizing because you're really sorry. You're apologizing because you're scared Uncle Lucas will kick you out of the house." Everyone in the room was stunned. No one expected a 9-year-old child to see through the essence of the situation so clearly. My parents stood there, faces pale, not knowing how to react. My mom turned to me. She grabbed my hand, her voice almost pleading, "Dustin, tell Michael to forgive us. We're really sorry. We're begging you." My dad also chimed in, "Dustin, we were wrong. Please forgive us." I looked down at Mom's hand gripping mine tightly. I shook her hand away, then turned to look at Dad. My voice coldly asked back, "Earlier, didn't you say you don't have any son named Dustin, and no grandson named Michael?" My parents' faces went completely pale when I repeated their words. They stood there like two statues, unable to respond. Lucas now spoke up, cutting through the suffocating atmosphere. "All right then. Michael hasn't forgiven yet, but Dad and Mom have realized their mistakes. I'll temporarily let this slide and observe further. But I'm warning you, if anything similar happens again, I won't be lenient." My parents breathed sighs of relief, as if they'd just been spared their lives. Right after that, Lucas turned to look at Barbara and asked directly, "What about you? Are you going to apologize to Michael?" Barbara screamed, "I'm not wrong. I have nothing to apologize for. Just looking at his face makes me want to vomit." Lucas looked at Barbara for a long while, his eyes not wavering at her challenge. Then he replied, "Fine. Don't regret it." After that statement, Lucas walked over to Michael and me. He put his hand on my shoulder, then said briefly, "Let's go, brother. There's nothing left here worth staying for." I nodded, gripped Michael's hand tight, and walked out of the house full of family members I no longer wanted to claim. When we got outside, before Lucas got into his car, I pulled his hand back. I said to him, "Lucas, I thank you. Thank you for protecting Michael." Lucas looked at me, then turned to look at Michael. He reached up to pat my son's head affectionately, then said to Michael, "Take care of yourself, kiddo. This summer, I'll come pick you up to travel with me. To Hawaii. Do you like the beach?" Michael's eyes lit up when he heard Lucas speak. For the first time all evening, I saw something like joy in my son. He excitedly asked back, "Are you serious, uncle? You promise?" Lucas smiled and replied, "I've never made a promise I didn't keep. Don't worry about it." After that, Lucas opened the car door and got in the driver's seat. Before starting the engine, he rolled down the window and said to me, "Oh, remember to check my new post online tomorrow. There's something fun." Without waiting for me to ask anything more, he hit the gas and drove away into the night. At that time, I thought he'd post something random on his personal page, maybe a few photos or some status update. I had no idea that what my brother did next would bring me to tears. The next morning, around 9 o'clock, I lazily opened my phone and went to Lucas's personal page to see what fun thing he mentioned last night, and I was utterly shocked by what was happening. Lucas had posted a video recording the entire incident at the party on his personal page, from when Barbara whispered insults about Michael to when she refused to apologize. Along with the video were old photos of Barbara from her 2010 accident and the failed cosmetic surgery in 2011. The post already had thousands of shares. The online community exploded. Comments flooded in, filled with criticism and outrage, and were directed at Barbara. People called her a monster, a poisonous snake, a heartless person. Some even tracked down Barbara's personal account and tagged her in the post. Others attacked her personal page directly, leaving hundreds of hateful comments. Even some extremists found out the name of the real estate company where Barbara worked and started calling the company's hotline, demanding her termination. They threatened to boycott the company if it continued to employ such an evil person as Barbara. About an hour after I finished reading what was happening online, my phone rang. The incoming call was from Barbara. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to answer. As soon as I picked up, Barbara's screaming pierced straight into my ear. "Are you satisfied now, Dustin? Because of you, because of your son, I just got suspended from work. You're happy, aren't you? You're satisfied, aren't you?" Hearing her panic like that, I burst out laughing. My laughter was loud and refreshing in a way I didn't expect. Then I replied, voice full of sarcasm, "Extremely satisfied. Extremely pleased. Lucas gave you a chance to apologize to Michael last night, but you refused. A vicious person like you deserves these consequences." After that statement, I hung up, not giving her a chance to say anything more. Then I blocked her number entirely, not wanting to hear anything from this person again. That evening, I decided to take Michael to Lucas's house to thank my brother once more. For the first time in many years, my brother and I sat down together to drink beer. Michael sat on the couch watching cartoons, while Lucas and I sat on the balcony, sipping cold beer and chatting. I thanked Lucas for everything he'd done for my son and me. I admitted to him that for all these years I'd misunderstood my brother, had thought he was arrogant and judgmental, when in reality he'd always cared about me in his own way. That night, we talked until 2 in the morning. We spoke about childhood, about happy and sad memories, about the years that had passed. 2 years have passed since that memorable Christmas night. Michael's and my lives have changed a lot. I still work selling used cars, but my income is better than before. Michael has turned 11. He's bigger, more mature, and has learned to accept the scars on his face as part of himself. He has new friends at school, kids who see Michael for who he is, not just his scars. Lucas kept his promise. In the summer of 2024, he took Michael to Hawaii for 2 weeks. My son saw blue ocean and white sand for the first time, went snorkeling to see coral reefs, and swam with dolphins. The relationship between Lucas and me became closer than ever. As for Barbara, she and her family disappeared from our lives. Her family moved to another state to start over. Nobody knows exactly where they are, and nobody wants to know. She cut ties with our parents, blaming them for not protecting her from Lucas. My parents still live in Lucas's house, but there have been noticeable changes. Over the past 2 years, they've come to my house many times, hoping to see Michael. They bring gifts, bring cakes, bring apologies that I don't know if they're sincere or just because they're scared of Lucas. They even suggested throwing a birthday party for Michael at their house, complete with balloons and cake. But it's all useless. Every time my parents come over, Michael immediately runs into his room and slams the door shut. He won't come out to see them, won't accept their gifts, won't listen to anything they say. Every time I see Michael react like this, my parents don't need me to kick them out. They quietly leave on their own with sad faces and red eyes. I don't interfere with Michael's decisions. My view is that he has the right to express his feelings. Who to love or hate is his choice. They hurt him deeply that Christmas night, and he has the right to refuse forgiveness, has the right to refuse to see them. Those are his wounds, and only he has the right to decide when and whether they should heal. What do you think about my perspective? Do you agree with me that I should let Michael decide his relationship with his grandparents himself? Or do you think I should encourage him to forgive? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to hear everyone's perspective. Through this story, I have a few pieces of advice to share with you. First advice: never let anyone, even family members, insult your children. Second advice: don't be quick to judge others based on appearance. Sometimes, the people we think are enemies are actually our greatest allies. And final advice: give your children the right to decide their own emotions. Healing is a journey, and everyone has the right to travel that journey at their own pace. My story ends here. If this story touched your emotions, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support us and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our latest stories. Thank you for listening to the end of this story. See you in the next ones. At that Christmas party, my mom picked up the plastic doll missing one arm, turned to laugh with my sister, and said loud enough for half the room to hear, "See? I told you so. Broken toys for the kid who doesn't belong in this family. Perfect." The moment those words rang out, I felt like someone had just punched me straight in the chest. My heart seemed to stop beating for a second. My 4-year-old daughter, Mia, was sitting in the middle of the floor with the broken-arm doll in her lap. She looked up at me with her clear eyes, then smiled. "Daddy, she's hurt. I'm gonna take care of her." That smile. Could you please understand this? That smile nearly tore my heart in two. Because she didn't know. She didn't compare. She didn't wonder why her cousins were opening presents as big as she was. iPads, electric bikes, limited edition Lego sets, while she got a cheap, old plastic doll missing an arm. And in that exact moment, watching my daughter hug that broken doll to her chest as if it were the most precious treasure in the world, I knew I had to make a decision that would change everything forever. Before I tell you what happened that day, thanks for choosing my story today. Hello everyone. I'm Marcus, 35 years old. I'm an elementary school teacher. The teacher's salary isn't high, but I love my job. My wife, Elena, works as a nurse at the community hospital. She works night shifts, usually comes home just as the sun's coming up with dark circles under her eyes, but still doesn't forget to kiss sleeping Mia's forehead before going to shower. Mia, our daughter, is a special child. Not special in the way people usually say as a compliment. Mia talks slower than the other kids. She's so shy she can barely speak to strangers. The doctor says she's completely normal and needs more time. But my family, my parents, my sister, they look at Mia differently. With pity, with disappointment, like she's a defective product that needs fixing. The story I'm telling today happened a year ago. That afternoon, around 4 o'clock, I drove our family to my parents' house for the Christmas party. Elena sat in the passenger seat, holding the bag of gifts we'd been preparing for weeks. Mia sat in the back, hugging tight the old teddy bear she called Mr. Bear. Throughout the nearly hour-long drive, I could feel the underlying tension in the car. Elena would glance over at me occasionally, her eyes holding an unspoken question. When the car turned onto the familiar street leading to my parents' neighborhood, Elena finally spoke up, asking me in a gentle but worried voice, "Marcus, are you sure? We can still turn around. Say Mia's sick or something." Hearing my wife, I gripped the steering wheel tighter, staying silent for a long moment. Then I sighed and replied, "This year will be different. They promised." Elena didn't say anything more, but I could feel the doubt in her eyes. She'd witnessed me coming back from family gatherings too many times. Hurt I tried to hide, but I still hoped. How foolish. I still hoped. Around 5 in the afternoon, we arrived at my parents' house. The two-story White House with red tile roof stood imposingly before me, familiar yet strange. This was where I was born and raised, but I'd never really felt like I truly belonged here. Before getting out of the car, I turned to look at Mia. She was looking out the window, her eyes wide, seeming a bit worried. Trying to push down my own anxiety, I forced a reassuring smile and said to her, "Sweetheart, today we're visiting Grandma and Grandpa. Remember to say hello to everyone, okay?" Mia nodded shyly, her arms still hugging Mr. Bear tight. Elena opened the car door, got out, and picked up Mia. She kissed her cheek, then whispered something in Mia's ear. I couldn't hear clearly, but I saw her nod and seem a little less tense. I grabbed the gift bag and led the way inside. The living room now had about 20 people. Relatives from all over had gathered, chatting and laughing loudly. Some people turned to look when we walked in, nodded politely, then quickly turned back to their conversations. My dad, Richard, was standing by the fireplace, one hand holding a wine glass, the other resting on my brother Daniel's shoulder. The two were laughing and talking with a group of relatives, who seemed to be discussing some real estate investment. Daniel is 5 years older than I am. He's a cardiovascular surgeon with an annual income probably 5 times my teacher's salary. He's always been Mom and Dad's pride and joy, the name that gets mentioned whenever they want to brag to others. Daniel's wife, Olivia, was sitting on the leather couch, one hand scrolling through her phone, the other stroking her 8-year-old daughter, Madison's, hair. Madison is the grandchild my parents spoil the most, with shining blonde hair and blue eyes just like her mother. As soon as she saw us walk in, my mom, Patricia, looked up from her conversation with some relatives. She looked at me for a second, nodded slightly, as if acknowledging our presence. Then her gaze swept over Elena and stopped on Mia. I recognized that look immediately, cold, distant, like looking at a foreign object that didn't belong here. Mom didn't get up to greet us. She just turned back to continue talking with the person next to her, like we were just invisible ghosts. At that moment, Elena squeezed my hand tight. I felt the warmth from her palm, like a reminder that she was still here, beside me. While I was standing awkwardly in the middle of the living room, not knowing where to go or what to say, a familiar voice rang out from behind. "Marcus, you finally made it." The person who just spoke was Uncle Raymond, my dad's younger brother. His face broke into a warm smile as he talked to me. Uncle Raymond is the most different person in the family. While my dad pursued a real estate career and always valued money and status, Uncle Raymond chose a completely different path. He's a carpenter, owns a small workshop on the outskirts of Austin, specializing in handmade furniture. He's not wealthy, not famous, and because of that, he's always seen as the failure in my dad's and the family's eyes. But to me, Uncle Raymond has always been the person I respect most. After that greeting, he walked over to us, then crouched down to Mia's eye level. With a voice as gentle as coaxing a baby bird, he said to Mia, "Hello, little princess. I have something special for you." Right after that, he pulled from his shirt pocket a tiny wooden horse, carved meticulously down to every detail. Mia looked at the horse with bright eyes, shyly reaching out to accept it. The moment she had the gift in her hands, Mia looked up at Uncle Raymond and said, softly, her voice trembling with shyness, Thank you." Uncle Raymond smiled, patted Mia's head, then stood up. Turning to Elena and me, he said to us, "I saved seats for you 3 at the dinner table. Next to me. Follow me." Hearing him say that, I felt a bit of warmth spreading in my chest. At least in this family, there was still one person who saw us as a real family. I led Mia to the spot Uncle Raymond had saved for us. The 3 of us sat in a corner of the table, somewhat separated from the center group where my parents, Daniel, and his family were seated. Elena sat down next to me, one hand resting on my thigh under the table as a reassuring gesture. Mia sat between Uncle Raymond and me. For the first half hour of the party, the atmosphere was relatively normal. Everyone ate and chatted. Occasionally laughter rang out from the head of the table where my parents sat. A few relatives politely asked me about my teaching job, about family life. I answered briefly, trying to keep my face normal even though my heart was always on alert. Then the conversation turned to a familiar topic, Daniel's brilliant achievements. After a few drinks, my dad stood up, raised his wine glass high, and announced to the whole table, "I want everyone to congratulate Daniel. My son was just appointed head of cardiovascular surgery at the hospital. This is the greatest honor our family has ever received." Applause rang out. My mom smiled proudly, her eyes sparkling as she looked at Daniel. Daniel nodded humbly in thanks, but I caught the smug smile hidden behind that fake modesty. After Dad's speech, the conversation continued revolving around Daniel. He talked about a complex surgery he just performed, the advanced medical equipment the hospital had just acquired, and plans to open his own clinic next year. Olivia didn't miss the chance to brag either. She talked about Madison just winning first place in the state piano competition, about the kid being invited into the gifted program, and about invitations from prestigious private schools. My mom listened with admiring eyes, occasionally turning to the person next to her to say things like, "My granddaughter is so talented," or "Good genes run in this family." And I sat there like a shadow, and no one asked about Mia. My daughter sat in silence, occasionally looking over at Madison, laughing and talking with her grandparents, her eyes holding something I didn't dare name. Uncle Raymond noticed my silence. He leaned over, whispered in my ear, "Ignore them. You're doing great." I nodded, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. At that moment, I had no idea that my daughter was about to get everyone's attention in a way no one expected. Around 7:30, after everyone had eaten their fill, my mom stood up from her chair. She looked around the room, then clapped her hands to get attention and announced to everyone, "Now for the part the kids have been waiting for most. Opening Christmas presents." The children in the house cheered excitedly. Madison jumped down from her chair and ran toward the Christmas tree, where colorful gift boxes were piled up. Mia watched Madison go, her eyes lighting up a little too. She turned to look at me, like she was asking permission. Seeing my daughter's expectant look, Elena smiled encouragingly and said to her, "Go ahead, sweetie. Let's see what you got." I led Mia to the area near the Christmas tree, where the other children had already gathered. Elena followed behind, still holding the gift bag we'd brought. My mom began distributing gifts. She took each gift box from under the tree, read the name on the label, and handed it to each child. Madison was called first. She opened a brand new iPad Pro, her eyes lighting up. Cheers rang out from the adults around her. Next was another relative's son, an expensive electric bike. Then another relative's daughter, a limited edition Lego set. The gifts kept being opened, each one expensive and impressive. Sounds of amazement, applause, and laughter filled the room. Mia stood there watching each gift being opened, but she didn't show jealousy or make demands. She just stood still, waiting. Finally, my mom picked up a small package, wrapped in old newspaper instead of gift wrap like the others. She glanced at the name on the label, then turned to look at Mia. Without the excitement she'd shown for the other children, my mom said to Mia, "Oh, there's this one. Mia, this is your present." Mia shyly stepped forward to take the package. She came back to where I was standing, sat down on the floor, and started unwrapping it. The moment the newspaper was peeled away, I saw it. A cheap plastic doll. The doll's hair was tangled, and its clothes were dirty and wrinkled. And what made my heart feel like someone was squeezing it, the doll was missing an arm. The broken arm spot revealed rough plastic, looking like garbage pulled from a trash can. Mia looked at the doll for a long time. The room fell strangely silent. I could feel eyes focused on her. Then Mia did something that shattered my heart. She hugged the broken-armed doll to her chest, stroked its tangled hair, then looked up at me with the most innocent smile I'd ever seen. In a small, clear voice, she said to me, "Daddy, she's hurt. I'm gonna take care of her." Right at that moment, I heard laughter. My mom's laughter. She picked up the doll from Mia's hands to take a look, then turned to my sister-in-law, Olivia. Her voice was loud enough for half the room to hear as she said to Olivia, "See? I told you so. Broken toys for the kid who doesn't belong in this family. Perfect." Hearing that, Olivia burst out laughing, covering her mouth as if she were trying to hide it but really wanting everyone to see. The air in the room froze. Christmas music still played from the speakers, but it sounded like piercing static. A few relatives turned away to somewhere else, pretending not to hear. Others looked at us with eyes full of pity mixed with contempt. I stood there, feet like they were nailed to the floor. The blood in my body felt like it was boiling, but at the same time I felt cold to the bone. Elena stepped up next to me. She didn't say anything, but I could feel her body trembling with anger. Mia still sat there, her eyes starting to redden as she watched Grandma hold her doll and show it to others, as if it were a joke. After everything that had happened, I looked down at my daughter. Mia wasn't crying. She just sat there, her little hands resting on her lap, watching the doll being passed between my mom and Olivia like a toy to mock. It was her silence that broke something inside me. If Mia had cried, if she had screamed or demanded something, I may have found it easier to get through this moment. But she didn't do that. She just sat there, accepting it as if she were used to being treated this way. And that made me realize a painful truth. Mia, at 4 years old, had already learned to accept that she wasn't worthy. At this point, I was trying to hold back the rage boiling inside me. I know when you hear this, you'll say I'm a weakling, but I'm not someone who likes to use violence. I crouched down, gently picked up Mia. She wrapped her arms around my neck and rested her head on my shoulder. Elena stepped up beside me. Her voice trembled as she turned to ask me, "Marcus?" I didn't answer my wife. Instead, I walked toward my mom. My mom was holding the doll, still laughing with Olivia about something. When she saw me approaching, she looked up, the smile on her lips slowly fading when she saw my expression. I held out my hand. My voice was cold as ice when I said to her, "Give me the doll." My mom looked at me for a moment, then placed the doll in my hand, her face showing a flicker of confusion, but it quickly returned to normal. Right after that, she frowned and asked me with an annoyed tone, "Why are you being so uptight? It was just a joke." I didn't respond. I just stood there, one arm holding Mia, one hand holding the broken-armed doll, staring straight into my mom's eyes. A few seconds of heavy silence passed. Then I turned to look at Elena. She understood immediately. She walked to the small table where we'd placed our gift bag and started picking up each present to put back in the bag. Seeing Elena's actions, my mom frowned and asked us, "What are you doing?" I still didn't answer. I waited for Elena to finish packing, then turned to face the entire room. Everyone was looking at us. My dad had stood up from his chair, his face frowning. Daniel stood next to Dad, arms crossed with a disdainful look. Olivia was still smiling, as if she were watching a good play. Uncle Raymond had also stood up. He stood a bit apart from the crowd, his eyes meeting mine. I recognized the support in his gaze. I took a deep breath. Then, in the silent room, I spoke clearly to everyone. It took me 34 years to understand one thing. This family has never seen me as part of the family. And now, you're doing the same thing to my daughter. My mom opened her mouth to say something, but I held up my hand to stop her. Not letting anyone interrupt, I continued, "I'm not done talking. We spent a whole month choosing and preparing these gifts. But I realize I was wrong. You don't deserve to receive them." Hearing that, my dad stepped forward. His voice was stern when he said to me, "Marcus, don't be so dramatic. This is a family party." I turned to look straight into Dad's eyes and asked back, "Family? What family gives a 4-year-old child a broken-armed doll and then laughs at her in front of everyone?" My dad fell silent. He had no answer. Right then, Daniel jumped in. His voice was full of contempt as he said to me, "You're always too sensitive. It's just a gift. Mia's young. What does she understand?" Hearing that, Elena stepped up next to me. She looked straight into Daniel's eyes and said to him, "Mia understands everything. Children understand more than adults think." And today, she learned that in her grandparents' eyes, she's not worth more than a broken-armed doll. Olivia snorted, mumbling something to Daniel that I couldn't hear clearly. Finally, my mom spoke up, her voice raised in anger as she said to us, "What do you want? Want me to get on my knees and apologize? Over a doll?" I looked at Mom, slowly shook my head, and replied, "No, I don't need an apology, because I know it wouldn't be sincere." In the midst of the tense atmosphere, a voice rang out from behind. Uncle Raymond stepped out of the crowd, standing between my parents and me. His voice was deep and firm as he spoke to everyone. "All right, I've been quiet long enough." My dad looked at him with annoyance. Unable to hide his irritation, he said to Uncle Raymond, "Raymond, this isn't your business." Uncle Raymond turned to look at my dad, his eyes cold in a way I'd never seen before. Hearing my dad's words, Uncle Raymond asked him back with a calm but heavy voice. Not my business? You just let your wife humiliate a 4-year-old child in front of the whole family. An innocent child. Your own granddaughter. And you say this isn't my business? My dad gritted his teeth. He replied harshly, you have no right to lecture me on how to treat the children in my house. Uncle Raymond laughed, but there was no joy in that laugh. He shook his head, then said to my dad, you're always like this. Always think you're right. Always think that money and status are everything. Do you know why Marcus never wants to come home? My dad fell silent after that question. Without waiting for an answer, Uncle Raymond continued with his voice ringing out clear. Because, since he was little, you and Patricia taught him he wasn't good enough. He wasn't as smart as Daniel. He wasn't as handsome as other people's sons. He was just an ordinary kid, and in your eyes, ordinary means failure. Hearing this, my mom couldn't take it anymore. She interrupted, her voice shaking with anger as she said to Uncle Raymond, we raised him properly. We gave him everything he needed. Uncle Raymond turned to look at my mom, his eyes boring into her as he asked back, everything? Do you know Marcus wore Daniel's hand-me-downs throughout his entire childhood? While Daniel got new clothes every season. Do you know when Marcus graduated from college? You two didn't even attend the ceremony because you were busy vacationing with Daniel? I stood there, hearing Uncle Raymond speak out the things I'd buried for so many years. Painful memories from the past flooded back like a waterfall. My mom stammered, seeming like she wanted to say something to justify herself, but Uncle Raymond didn't give her the chance. His voice lowered as he continued speaking to both my parents. And now you're doing the same thing to Mia, a 4-year-old child. So what if she talks a little slowly? So what if she's a little shy? Mia is still your granddaughter. Mia still deserves to be loved. Right then, Daniel stepped forward, seeming like he wanted to defend our parents. His voice full of challenge as he said to Uncle Raymond, old man, don't interfere in our family business. Who are you to lecture us? Uncle Raymond turned to look at Daniel, the smile on his lips carrying sarcasm. He slowly said to him, Dr. Daniel, the family's golden child. You know what? You're very talented, very successful, but you have no heart. You stood there watching your wife mock a 4-year-old child without saying a word. You stayed silent when your mother called your niece damaged goods. You have everything, but you lack the most important thing. Hearing Uncle Raymond's words, Daniel gritted his teeth. He replied with a voice full of contempt. You talk like you're so perfect. You're just a carpenter. Uncle Raymond nodded, not seeming offended at all. He calmly said to Daniel, that's right. I'm just a carpenter. I don't have a mansion, I don't have luxury cars, I don't have social status. But I have something you don't have. I know how to love people without conditions. The room fell into silence. Uncle Raymond turned to look at me, then nodded gently. He walked over to me, placed his hand on my shoulder, and said to me in a warm voice, Marcus, let's go. You don't need to stay here. I looked at him, my heart filled with gratitude. I nodded, but before turning away, I looked back at my mom, my dad, Daniel, Olivia, and all the people who had stayed silent or been complicit in what just happened. My voice was calm but decisive as I said to them, this is the last time we'll appear here. Don't call, don't text, don't look for us. You made your choice. Seeing us turn to leave, my mom screamed at me, Marcus, if you walk out that door, don't ever come back. I didn't stop walking. I didn't turn around. Mia still hugged my neck tight, her face hidden against my shoulder. The broken-armed doll lay in Elena's hands, who was walking beside me with a determined expression. Uncle Raymond followed us to the door. When we stepped outside, the cold Christmas night air hit my face. Snow was falling gently, covering the ground with a thin white layer. Uncle Raymond stopped at the front steps, looking at us with warm eyes. He smiled and said to me, Marcus, I'm proud of you. You did the right thing. I turned back to look at him, my throat closing up. My voice was hoarse as I said to him, thank you. Thank you for everything. Uncle Raymond smiled. His eyes were gentle as he continued to say to me, go on. Go home to your family. And remember, if you need anything, call me. Elena stepped forward and quickly hugged Uncle Raymond. She squeezed his hand and said to him, thank you. Then Uncle Raymond crouched down to Mia's eye level and patted her head. His voice was gentle as he said to her, "Brave little girl. The wooden horse I gave you, take good care of it." Mia looked up, her eyes still red, but she nodded. Her voice was small as she said to him, "I will keep it safe. Thank you." After that, we got in the car and drove away, leaving behind the brightly lit house and the people who called themselves family. A week after that Christmas night, Elena and I sat down for a serious talk about the future. Our small apartment in Austin suddenly felt cramped and suffocating. Every time I drove past familiar streets, I remembered painful memories, awkward family gatherings, the contemptuous looks I'd tried to ignore for so many years. Elena was the first to say what we were both thinking. She set her coffee cup down on the table, looked straight into my eyes and said, "I think we should move away." I looked at her, not surprised but still feeling my heartbeat race. After a moment of silence, I asked her, "Are you serious?" Elena nodded, her eyes determined. She squeezed my hand gently and continued, "Mia needs a new environment. Somewhere, no one looks at her with pity or contempt. Somewhere she can grow up without worrying about whether she's good enough or not." I sat in silent thought. Moving meant leaving everything behind: jobs, friends, familiar things. But at the same time, it also meant starting over, somewhere without the ghosts of the past. After considering for a while, I asked her, "Where are you thinking?" Hearing that question, Elena smiled. Her eyes lit up as she answered, "Portland, Oregon. I have an old school friend there. She says the city is beautiful, close to nature, and has lots of job opportunities for both of us." Portland. I thought about the photos I'd seen: lush green forests, snow-capped mountains, peaceful streets. A place completely different from Austin. And I nodded in agreement with my wife's suggestion. That night, I called Uncle Raymond. He heard the news of our planned move with surprising calm. His voice was warm over the phone as he said to me, "I think that's the right decision. You need a fresh start. Mia needs a fresh start. Don't worry about me. Wherever you are, I can come visit." My throat closed up. I took a deep breath, then said to him, "I'm gonna miss you." Hearing that, Uncle Raymond laughed. His laughter rang out warmly through the line as he replied, "I'll miss you too. But remember, this isn't goodbye. It's just a new chapter." Before hanging up, Uncle Raymond suddenly remembered something. His voice was more excited as he added, "Oh, I have a gift I want to give Mia. Let me send it through the mail." I thanked him, then hung up, my heart filled with gratitude that there was still one person in the family who truly cared about us. 6 months later, we had settled into life in Portland. Our new home was a small wooden house in the suburbs, with a large yard and a view of distant mountains. Not big, not fancy, but cozy and peaceful. I found a teaching job at an elementary school nearby. My new colleagues were friendly and enthusiastic. The students here were just as eager and adorable as the kids back in Austin. Elena switched to working at a community clinic with more stable hours and no more endless night shifts. She had more time for family, and I noticed the smile on her lips appeared more and more often. And Mia, she was like a flower placed in the right spot, beginning to bloom. She started talking more. At first, just short sentences, then gradually longer stories. She made new friends at kindergarten, children who didn't care if Mia spoke fast or slow, but only cared about playing together. On the bookshelf in Mia's room, the broken arm doll still sat in a place of honor. Elena had sewn the arm back on with a small, flowered fabric patch. Not perfect, but full of love. Mia named the doll Hope. Next to Hope was the wooden horse Uncle Raymond gave her, along with the new gift he'd sent through the mail, a tiny wooden rabbit, carved meticulously down to every detail. Uncle Raymond kept in regular contact with us. One video call a week, one handwritten letter a month. With a small wooden toy for Mia, he promised to visit us in the summer, and Mia counted down the days. And my parents, Daniel, Olivia, they didn't contact us, and I didn't reach out either. Sometimes on late nights I wondered if they regretted it, if they missed Mia. But then I pushed those thoughts aside. They had made their choice, and so had I. A few months later, on a peaceful Saturday morning, I was sitting drinking coffee on the front porch, watching Mia play with our new golden retriever in the backyard. My phone buzzed, unknown number. I hesitated a moment, then answered. Uncle Raymond's voice came through, sounding unusually serious. He told me my mom had been in a car accident 3 days ago. Serious. She survived but lost an arm. Left arm. Doctors couldn't save it. I heard this news and felt nothing. Not happy, not sad, not satisfied. Just empty. But what stunned me wasn't the news about the accident. Uncle Raymond continued with something strange that had happened. Someone had sent a gift to my mom's hospital room. Plastic doll. Missing a left arm. Just like the arm my mom had lost. No card, no sender's name. Just the doll in a cardboard box. I almost dropped the phone when I heard that. Uncle Raymond added that the family suspected me. They thought I'd sent the doll for revenge. My dad was furious. Daniel was threatening to sue. The whole house was in an uproar. Hearing this, I told him, I didn't do that. I didn't even know Mom was in an accident until a few minutes ago. Uncle Raymond immediately replied warmly, I believe you, but they don't. Right after I hung up with Uncle Raymond, the phone rang again, my dad's number. I answered. What happened next was a storm of curses. My dad called me a demon, an evil person, something unworthy of being human. He screamed that I'd sent that doll to humiliate her while she was suffering in the hospital bed. He threatened to sue me to make me pay. I listened in silence as he vented his rage. When he stopped to catch his breath, I only said one thing. I didn't send that doll. But I don't need to prove anything to you either. Then I hung up. The days after that, my phone constantly rang and buzzed with calls and texts from family, even relatives I barely remembered, all calling to curse, threaten, or demand I confess. They called me evil, ungrateful, family trash. A week later, Uncle Raymond called with new information. Police had investigated and concluded there wasn't enough evidence to determine who sent the doll. The cardboard box was mailed from a public post office in Austin. No cameras recorded it, no fingerprints, nothing at all. The case was filed as unsolvable. My family still suspected me, but couldn't do anything about it. Before hanging up, Uncle Raymond said something I'll never forget. He told whoever sent that doll didn't think this was a coincidence. Life has its own way of balancing things. My mom had given Mia a one-armed doll and mocked her own granddaughter. Now she'd lost an arm and received a similar doll. He didn't know if it was karma, fate, or just a strange coincidence. But he believed everything happens for a reason. I said nothing. I don't believe in karma or the universe's punishment. But I don't deny it either. My family's current life is very peaceful. Mia is growing up healthy and happy. Elena is still by my side every day. Uncle Raymond is still the only relative from the old family we keep in touch with. That's all I need. Through this story, I have 5 pieces of advice to share with you. First advice. Don't let anyone in your family insult your child. When they look down on your kid. When they give your child a terrible gift and mock them. When they call your child damaged goods. That's when you must stand up. Second advice. Never intend to hurt children. Karma will come. My mom gave Mia a one-armed doll and mocked her own granddaughter. A few months later, she lost an arm in a car accident and received a one-armed doll from an anonymous sender. What you sow, you reap. Third advice. If your family shows signs of favoritism, take your child away immediately. I was too weak. I knew my parents looked at Mia differently, but I still hoped, still tried, still brought her to family gatherings with naive belief that this year will be different. I was wrong. If you see signs of favoritism, don't wait. Don't hope they'll change. Please protect your child right away. Fourth advice. Don't be afraid to move to another state. After that Christmas night, we moved from Austin to Portland. Leaving familiar places, leaving jobs, leaving friends. That was scary, but it was the best decision I ever made. Fifth advice. Treasure the people who genuinely love you. Uncle Raymond was the only one who stood by me. He was the only one who stood up to protect us when the whole world turned away. Don't miss people like Uncle Raymond in your life. They might not be perfect, not wealthy, not famous, but they have heart. And sometimes that's all you need. That's the end of my story. Before saying goodbye, I have one question for you. Who do you think sent that one-armed doll to my mom when she was in the hospital? My wife, Uncle Raymond? Leave your choice in the comments below this story. Thanks for listening to my story. If this story touched your emotions, don't forget to subscribe to support us and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our latest stories. I look forward to seeing you in the following stories.